Hey, good Wednesday morning, and thanks for logging on to BAMWX.com for a long-range forecast update. Meteorologist Michael Clark here. Hope you're all having a wonderful week. We're taking a look at 24-hour temperature change, and you can just see how strong this cold front is. Some places here turning as much as 27 degrees colder than yesterday. So just a big cold front has come through, and it's a big change here just in the short term because of, right now we're sitting at basically at the third to fourth warmest September on record, and really we've been in this really warm pattern since May. So we need to try to figure out, are we going to be able to change the pattern, and if so, when? What are the details of that looking like? You can see that as of right now that we are sitting amongst some of these very warm Septembers. Our CONUS average is 2.36 above, so we're very close to the top three going forward. So this is a look at precipitation here just over the last 30 days at percent of normal. And you can see how much rain has fallen here in portions of Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and even locally across portions of Indiana. Some places have gotten 3 to 4 inches of rain the last couple of days. So it's continued to remain wet here. And going forward, while we do have somewhat of a drier week in the forecast, there is some concerns that it can turn exceptionally wet again next week in the same areas that have already picked up this rain. So in terms of delays in harvest, that's certainly something that can possibly continue. What we're going to deal with is this big trough comes through, and it brings a nice pullback in temperatures, but getting into early next week, the ridge reestablishes itself pretty quickly, and temperatures are going to be allowed to warm here. In fact, if I tell you, it's this pretty impressive ridge here getting into next week by next Tuesday, and just looking at the model forecast as far as temperatures from average go, you can see that the temperatures are certainly going to remain warm in the south and into the east. And I have a theory behind that. Obviously, you see how cold it is to the north, and I'll talk about that theory here shortly. But going forward here, you can just watch the pattern getting out into week 2, and this is by day 15. And again, you can see just the resiliency of this ridge here in the east, just continuing to try and show itself. We do have a lot of high latitude ridging going on up here across northwest Canada and into Alaska. So that will allow for cold to at least spill in on the west side of that ridge. If you look at the one-day averages out to day 15, and again, you can see how it still maintains the warmth east and the cooler temperatures back to the west. Now, again, that's more of a La Nina-like flavor. It really is. I mean, to get a southeast ridge and a northwest trough, that's a La Nina trait, if you will. And so I think that in itself slowly starts to change. But over the course of the next 2 weeks, a lot is hinged on the western Pacific Ocean and what it's going to do, because you see we have a strong typhoon here that's set to recurve any day, and that will present a cold risk in the 6 to 10 day, no question. Could be a big trough there. But then we look out here and we see in the 6 to 10 day another possible west-moving typhoon that could add some warmer risks into the forecast, say beyond the 11 to 15 day period, into the 16 to 20. So there's certainly the Western Pacific is making it very difficult right now to pinpoint exactly where this pattern is going to go and when it's going to go there. We look at our week 1 and 2 outlooks, and we just try to come up with the best possible solution really that we can based on our thoughts and models. Now, models have just not done well. They've really struggled. So it's a tough call getting into how we think it evolves. But you look at our week 2 outlook. Obviously, we have a lot higher confidence, at least in week 1 overall. But week 2, we think that we can still continue to keep some warmth here across the east and the southeast, and that's going to play into our October outlook. I'll talk about that here at the end, but you can see it. We are expecting, I do think, a strong cold front is in the cards closer to the 5th or the 7th or so of October, and so I think that the models can trend colder in week 2, pending the recurve of the typhoon there in the western Pacific. But again, you can see while week 1 calms down in precipitation-wise, week 2, we do bring back that forecast of above normal rains, some spots perhaps 200% of the normal here, the 3rd through the 9th of October. So again, that is going to pose as a delay for continued delays, if you will, for harvest. Now, looking at our organic forecast methods and the Southern Oscillation Index, this does support this brief pump up in the ridge next week. Right, this rise here supports about the 27th through about the 2nd of October. That rise is there, and it does support some ridging in the east. But as we see this negative dip, this big dip, we went from 10 to minus 30. It's a 40-point drop in the SOI. You can see that it does support a big cold front and a possible cooler regime. But look at the rise on the backside here, and we looked at that western moving typhoon in the Pacific out by day 10. There are perhaps a risk of another warm spell coming closer to mid-October, so that's something at least to keep in the back of our minds here. But we look at our global wind pattern. This is our global wind oscillation. Again, that negative global wind oscillation is, again, more of that La Nina trait where you get more ridging, if you will. Lately, just the last couple of days, we've seen some very strong positive tendencies, and we're starting to see this rise, getting into a rising phase of the angular momentum. And when we look at positive tendencies and we look at October's, they do feature a trough in the east and a ridge in the west. And so that, again, while I think this is a pretty close look of what can happen, I'm suspecting here in the eastern and southeastern U.S., with the very warm waters in the Atlantic Ocean. And again, I will discuss that here in just a second. But again, there's support there in the global wind pattern to get out of this La Nina-like forcing, if you will, and perhaps bring in more of a El Nino flavor for October if we can back the ridge to the west a little bit and continue to get this angular momentum to rise. If we look at the overnight GFS run, the operational computer model does support that of a rise in the angular momentum, at least to neutral or weekly positive. And we're watching the red squares here. Okay, that's what we want to take a look at. That's the operational run, very close to the European. So again, it does support that possible look like this. Okay, but what's kind of got me held up, at least along the East Coast and along the southeast, is just the tendency and again the resiliency of this ridge and these very warm waters. I think these are kind of making it difficult to lower the heights here in the east, and so to get an all-out cooler pattern in the east in October might be somewhat challenging. That might be difficult to do, and that's going to play into our final outlook for the month of October. All right, and that will be issued on Friday, and I'll discuss more in just one second. But if we take the method of the top 10 hottest Septembers on record, and I subtract the 1930s because this is not the Dust Bowl, this is the look that you get. And again, you see this very warm eastern U.S. profile and this normal to slightly cooler normal look to the north and west. But then we factor in the MJO, and out of all of those 8 years listed here, 1990 is the strongest match, as we do think we go into a 1 and 2 phase MJO, just like we did in 1990, and this is the look that you get for October. All right, you get this cold bleeding down into the big part of the country, but you're still above normal in the east, in the southeast, and again, that's supported by those warmer sea surface temperature profile there off the coast. And so I think that does play into this, but I like this October 90 analog. This October 1990 analog makes a lot of sense to me right now based on what we have, what our models are showing us, so on and so forth. So this is the latest CFS for today, the probability of an above or below normal temperature forecast. And again, you can see that it does support the warmth in the east, the warmth in the west, and the cooler than normal potential here. Now, this is I'm not so sure about this in between, but I think there is that the model does see that general theme. You can see yesterday's run actually saw that pretty well. And so the models see this outcome. The European sees it. The CFS sees it as well. So with respect to our October forecast, for those of you wondering about gas-weighted heating degree days, this is the EPS, the European data. The ensemble mean forecast is sitting at a 273.5. The 75th percentile is as much as 334.75. You jump up to the 90th percentile, there's some pretty cold runs in there, pretty cold members at 407. All right, so the mean of the ensemble, 273. Again, this ran just Monday evening. We've had our October outlook out since the 18th of September, sitting at a 275. We might say maybe if we make a change and we keep it above normal through here, possibly, we might add some yellow in here for an above normal temperature forecast. Maybe this goes down to a 270. We'll have to maintain or watch that very closely, but that's kind of the thought process right now. Maybe we would back the below normal back in through here and take the yellow in through here a little bit and into the south and east. All right, as I still think it can be cool in the central U.S. and central and southern plains. That's all I have for today. A lot going on. If you have questions, let me know. Have a great day.